Your graphing calculator can also be used to graph absolute value functions. However, you do have to be a little bit more careful when setting the window, and you have to be careful to identify where the calculator hid the absolute value operation. Because we're going to want to graph, we're going to go into y equals, and we're going to set ourselves up on the very first line. The absolute value function that we're going to graph is going to be y equals 3 times the absolute value of x minus 2 plus 4. Starting off with my 3, I'm going to follow that with the absolute value. Now, the absolute value is hidden inside of one of the calculator's menus. If we press math and then arrow over once to the right to the category that says num, our first option is the absolute value. While it says ABS, when we press enter, it's going to open for us the absolute value bars. And you'll see how the cursor is inside of the absolute value bars, meaning I'm ready to type in there. Some older calculators do not show the absolute value bars. They instead will actually write and type on the screen ABS with a parentheses. That's okay. That will serve the exact same function. It will do exactly what we need it to do. So if you're looking at a calculator that instead of having the absolute value bars has ABS, that does not change our work at all. You'll just have to make sure that you're careful, a little bit more careful to close the parentheses when you're done. But for my calculator, I have the 2 absolute value bars, and inside of there, I'm going to type x minus 2. Careful not to use the negative key, which is down by the enter. We want to make sure we're using the actual minus 2. Now, I need to get outside of this absolute value because this is the extent of what I want in here. You'll notice now that the cursor is flashing and has that arrow on it. I am able to, if I have nothing else to type in here, arrow once to the right and get out of the absolute value. And we're going to finish it with a plus 4. Now, if we're thinking about what we saw in the other videos regarding the absolute value function, we should anticipate that this 2 is going to move us to the right 2, this 4 is going to move us up 4, and this 3 is going to change the steepness. It's not going to change the direction because it is positive, but it's certainly going to change the steepness. And I hit graph, and I get a steeper V than what we would normally expect to see. And I did move over 2 to the right and 4 up. There's my vertex at the 0.24. The calculator's pixelation, you'll see that this is not in a straight line on the 2 sides. The calculator's pixelation leaves a lot to the imagination. In some respects, it's hard to see some of the things that we would want to look for. If I wanted to start trying to calculate the sides of this graph, the slopes of the sides of this graph, that would be very difficult to do. I would have to walk in knowing that it was already 3. It would be very challenging for me to do that. But I also know that by looking at this window, I have all of this dead space where nothing interesting is happening. Yeah, this half line on this side is going to cross over the x or the y-axis and then create something that's interesting. But I at the very least, know I don't have anything down here that's interesting. So if I click window and I scroll down to y min, I don't need to go all the way to -10. I'm perfectly comfortable stopping at 0. Pressing graph, and that gives me a little bit of a better look. Sure, I still can't count my slopes. This would be very difficult to try to determine which points I should actually use for my slopes if I wanted to see the 3 and the -3. For the sake of conversation, let's go through finding the absolute value operation one more time. Remember, it's in the math menu, so we're going to math. We're going to go over once to num. We're going to choose absolute value. We're going to put an x in there. And we'll arrow to the outside of it. This is going to be our generic parent function. And you can see how much narrower our original graph is than the parent function. If you wanted to, you could press trace, and you could trace around using the left and the right keys to key points on either one of the graphs. Pressing down gets you onto the other one, and up and down will take you from one graph to the other one. But you could move around if you're looking at particular points. there really isn't a ton of value in that. Because of the inaccuracy of the calculator, you can't find spots exactly or directly. So you have to be a little bit careful when using the calculator and making those adjustments and looking at those points, because you're not sure, yeah, this is an actual point to the graph, 4.255, 4.255, but you're probably much more interested in something like 4.4 or 2.2, one of the more common points.